Here's a statistic I just made up. I'm going to guess that more than likely about 99% of you who play Kantai Collection play it for the girls. Because otherwise you'd be playing World of Warships. And given that World of Warships grants the player a lot more control, allowing you to, first and foremost, among other features, actually manipulate your warship in real time, it's undoubtedly the less frustrating game in this comparison, since a lot of what makes up Kantai Collection's mechanics are literally decided by a random number generator. Your girls will just shoot at whatever. Your girls will become heavily damaged whenever. There isn't nearly as much science to it, it's just luck. So, why do many of us keep coming back? Because we're masochists. But even beyond that, it's just these girls that we've become endeared to over the course of our time as admirals that softens the irritating gameplay. Or, if you're cruel, it also allows you to get your sadism on instead by knowing that you're brutally injuring another person as you hear their cries and screams and faint yelps of submission as they sink to the bottom of the ocean, where the eventual pressure will crush their squishy limp bodies into mush, but ultimately you're going to want someone unforgettable, yeah? Well, unfortunately, back in the early days of KanColle, while many of the girls were fortunate enough to get at least a 2-note personality, or possibly something greater, other girls, looking back on them now, read like the developers were just scratching their heads, unable to come up with anything, but wanted the ship present to fill out the cast regardless. So, they disregarded their personality. Whoops! And let's keep in mind, this was back when the roster laid out somewhere very close to 100 characters, give or take, whereas now we have far, far more. And most of the additions since then have had great, or at the very least, identifiable personalities. So, in the perspective we'll be looking at this awkward circumstance today, this is a bit inexcusable since the bland, forgettable characters on this list have to live in the same world as the aforementioned new staple characters, as well as the characters that have existed alongside them since the beginning that were already league superior and can still hang with the newbies. But make no mistake about my intentions with this list. I am not determining the worst characters of the franchise, but simply the characters I had to purposefully clean out the attic of my mind in order to recall them, so to speak. So anyway, let's finally wrap up this intro. It's been way too long. These are my top 6 most forgettable Kanmusu in Kantai Collection. To set the tone for this list at number 6, I give you Kuroshio. Right off the bat, you might think, oh, well, her design doesn't necessarily look like something I'd easily forget, and I would agree. It's not the most iconic design in the world or anything, but it doesn't need to be. It's perfectly suitable for a character that could make an impression with their personality. So what's her personality like again? Without looking at her lines on the wiki, I couldn't tell you for sure. Maybe she's nice, I guess? Oh. What do you know? She's nice. Yeah.
Oh, well, jump my bones! She's got an accent!
So, during the making of this list, I knew I had 5 really good choices to make my brief case about the solid, overstuffed handful of forgettable characters that KanColle has offered us over these past few years. But I had trouble compromising over a 6th character to complete it. Skimming through the general table of characters, I suddenly crossed a character that I realized I had, no joke, legitimately forgotten existed. And it struck me harder when I further realized that I always had a bad habit of forgetting this particular character, even despite her getting an indisputably useful Kaini upgrade. Who is this character? Well, at number 5, it's Chikuma. Okay, how in the world could I forget a body like Chikuma's, right? Them birth-given hips, man. Oh, crap, I think I might have already run out a couple months. I mean, sure, she's got a nice rack, but so do about half the girls in this game. Her outfit implies that she doesn't wear any panties underneath those flaps, but is her vagina really supposed to substitute for her character? And speaking of character, Shikuma is actually worse than Kuroshio. Shikuma is a bona fide siscon. Her mind is filled only with thoughts about her sister. That is all. And I don't mean that as some spiteful summation of her personality, oh no, I mean, that's all I could extract. She isn't hilariously depressing like Yamashiro, she isn't a simple-minded bro like Hiei, she isn't a devil in sheep's clothing like Tatsuta, she isn't yandere dynamite like my lovely Oi. She's not even passionate about her siscon attitude. She sounds so casual about it, and yet she never talks about anything else. Why does she love her sister so much that she'd be willing to reject my ring for potential incest? What other definition outside of her chiseled booty or infatuation for Tone does Shikuma have compared to every other clear-cut siscon in this game? It's bothered me for the longest time since I've always really wanted to like Shikuma, but she's got no color to her. Like legit, even her design's color palette is pretty lackluster and muddy. Nothing really pops out besides them heart-stopping hips. But having an indistinct or bland personality alone isn't what marks a truly forgettable character. No, you've gotta really go the distance. And when their appearance is so forgettable that, at the first chance they get to show some distinction from the pack, people honestly mistake them for a different character entirely, that's when you know you've got a real winner. The best example of this sorry irony that I can think of would be for our poor number 4 entry, Nagara. No kidding here, when we were getting hints of a seasonal CG for Nagara, there were many people I personally witnessed thinking wholeheartedly that it was Maruyu getting a CG instead. Some people were actually pumped for this too, and thought it was about time Maruyu got something nice for a change after all of the luck farming she'd been used for almost exclusively. And given the visual hint, who could blame them for thinking that? It fits perfectly. Like, that tan is something that Maruyu could have acquired from Orel cruising, such as the joke is with Row 500. And that light spot could have been imprinted on her from her goggles. The color scheme even fit, and that hairstyle is virtually the same. Oh. Turned out to be Nagara. Who's Nagara again? Oh, she runs a lot. I see. Just like Shimakaze. Huh. Well, next up at number 3, we've got Isonami. Oh, Isonami. What's worse than a plain vanilla boring Fubuki class that isn't Fubuki, or Murakumo, or Hatsuyuki? A plain vanilla boring Fubuki class that isn't even required to complete anything. No quests, nothing. But what does that matter? There are plenty of girls who aren't required for quests, right? Well, firstly, in my experience, having a Kanmusu be required to complete a quest gives you the chance to utilize and thus potentially endear yourself to someone you might not have otherwise noticed or cared about. It can make for good bonding time. Second, most of those other girls who still have yet to be required for a quest certainly have more identity than this assembly line Fubuki class, both in appearance and personality. And those very few that don't, well, they're above her in our final 2 slots. Isonami having a couple funny lines and at least having a whisper of a personality outside of just simply being nice, although she certainly is that, keeps her from placing any higher, but every other quality of hers obviously echoes Fubuki herself to a T, just fashioning braids. Even the fan art agrees, this is Fubuki with braids. A mood-swung Fubuki. Now, the second to last character on this list doesn't necessarily feature an identity crisis in the same way that the previous 2 entries did. Instead, she acts as the pinnacle of my first and foremost issue, having little to no personality to speak of. As the penultimate example of forgettable Kanmusu in this game, at number 2, it's Yura. Oh lord, if there's a Kanmusu that could make a better case for these girls actually being robots, I don't know it. Not Kaga with her absence of outward emotions, not Chokai with her focus on calculations. Yura has literally nothing important, interesting, thought-provoking, or entertaining to say to you, the player, whatsoever. And her stats certainly aren't going to conceal her blank slate being across the board, straight average for a light cruiser. for argument's sake, could I suggest that she's just the quote-unquote normal one of the fleet? Well, no, because right off the bat, her hair isn't normal compared to, several other girls in this game, all of which actually having easily identifiable personalities to speak of. It's like she was obviously built by some random otaku to try and fit in with all the remaining cast's funky hairstyles. Literally the only thing iconic about her, if I can even call it that, since all it breaks down to is one really long, simple ribbon. And a turret. I don't know, maybe that's her actual brain. I mean, she functions just about the same. A walking gun that occasionally bloops out a quick piece of inoffensive human speech. Every line Yura utters is the most generically typical line anyone would come up with when presented with each type of statement that is required of the character. Well, except for her wedding line, which is quite possibly the most loveless statement ever uttered. Even the ciscons who reject you have more heartfelt wedding lines. Yes, including Chikuma. Just to settle this on some proof for those of you unswayed by my argument, let's take a look at some examples of Yura's brief vocalizations. Give me an introduction to yourself, please.
ながら型軽準4番館のユラです。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
Hello, Yura.
何？
Mind if I poke you?
提督さん？
I think these guns of yours are quite intriguing.
提督さん、私の単装法そんなに好き？
Though, how about I give you some better firepower?
いいんじゃない？
Here you are, that should do.
そうそう、火力を強化してね。ね。
Yes, indeed, but you're looking a little scruffy, I see. How about you take a bath for a while?
ありがとう。
Alright, finished now? I'll be having you join the first fleet for sortying. Do your best.
ながら型軽準ユラ、出撃します。砲雷撃戦始めます。よく狙って。痛いったら。そろそろ頃合いね。突撃負けないから。ユラが一番なの？ほんと？やったー。中ちゃんだよー。艦隊が戻ってきたようね。戦果あるかな？
The fleet performed well, Yura.
提督さん、ユラの推定どうかな？
Your recon was executed beautifully.
軽準では一応初めてなんだけど。
I think my work is done here. However, like how I addressed early on that this isn't necessarily a list of who I believe to be KanColle's worst characters, this also isn't necessarily a list of the most boring characters either. And my number one most forgettable Kanmusu isn't exactly the game's worst character, nor is she even the most boring like Yura. No, this Kanmusu, Mikazuki, is, in my opinion, the most forgettable Kanmusu because she represents, at her core, the blandest of the game's design offerings. Having her bear an uncanny resemblance to a far more useful character drawn by the same artist, an issue that has been repeated a couple other times throughout this list. A predetermined reduced prominence by the game's designers as little more than an expedition farmer by having her only statistical saving grace being her low resource consumption. Her personality, while cute and featuring much more life than Yura to help her stand out a little, doesn't stand out nearly enough when compared to many of the other characters that the player will actually be using for more heavy-duty roles. Any one of the Mutsuki class could have made this list, but I ultimately chose Mikazuki due to her being the best at identifying all of these negative qualities that weren't, of course, her fault, but actually the fault of the game's design and its developers back when Kantai Collection was first released. And I get it. On the other hand, it's nearly impossible to make every single character among a cast of planned to be hundreds shine just as brightly as every other character. It's like that with anything, really. So, what's ultimately the point of this whole list? Well, it's actually quite simple, really. It's easy to complain about how most of the prized ships of the past many events have been mostly either trophy destroyers or miscellaneous ships that aren't too useful outside of a very specific, highly circumstantial use. But take a minute to notice just how much effort has gone into many of their appearances and personalities to make up for that. I can't say for sure that the weaker characters of the past, such as those featured on this list, had something to do with the extra effort made on those newly introduced characters. Honestly, I'd be more inclined to suggest that it's more so intended to make up for the fact that we're consistently getting small and niche ships as prizes. But it's a welcome change, and such effort keeps me interested in each and every new Kanmusu to come sliding down the pipeline. This has been your host, writer, graphics designer, animator, and editor of this entire list, Zach. And if you'd like to see more lists done by me, don't forget to rate this video, and subscribe, and maybe even leave a comment down below if you either agreed with my choices, or would like to mention some other girls that you yourself find sadly forgettable in Kantai Collection. I mean, who knows? I may need to write up a new most forgettable characters list someday to mention those that didn't make this list. With all the addendums I've made to my personal favorites list, it's entirely within the realm of possibility.